Hey everybody, this is Heidi, and you're listening to the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast. We all know that the fashion industry is brutally competitive and it takes loads of hard work to get ahead. The problem is that everyone's secretive and tight-lipped about their ways. After working as a designer and educator for over a decade, I wanted to help break down those barriers and bring you valuable knowledge from industry experts, and this show is exactly where you'll find that. Whether you're trying to break into the fashion world, make yourself more marketable, launch your own label, or become a successful freelancer, we'll help you get ahead in the cutthroat fashion industry. This is episode 16 of the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast, and today I'm chatting with Kim Dippel, a fashion designer who's worked with surf brands like Oneil and Quiksilver. After having a baby and moving away from a fashion hub, she wanted to try freelancing. She didn't have any luck with her existing contacts, so she turned to Upwork, where she successfully landed a few ongoing clients that have kept her consistently busy. In the interview, Kim shares how to land your first few gigs on Upwork, why honesty and transparency is essential to building relationships, and how to raise your rates with new clients.
When I would reach out to clients, I would say, this is my hourly rate. I'm willing to negotiate that a little bit. And then we would talk further. So I would say, okay, maybe for this project, I'll do it for $5 less an hour, and we would negotiate that. But it was only for that specific project.
Before we jump into the interview, I want to remind you can help the show out and make it easier for others to discover by leaving a rating on iTunes. If you enjoy this episode, I'd really appreciate it if you'd take 60 seconds to do that. Visit sfdnetwork.com/review to leave your rating, and thanks for your support and help. To access the show notes for today's episode, visit sfdnetwork.com/16. Now on to the interview with Kim. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for joining me on the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast. I'm so excited to chat with you and everything you're working on. Why don't we get started by why don't you give a quick introduction of who you are and what you do and your experience in the industry?
All right. My name's Kim Dippel, my married name. And I have been working full-time in the industry for over 12 years now. I started at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, FIDM, as most people know it, in LA. And I did the 2-year course there and graduated in 2004, and then just kind of jumped in both feet first. Most of my experience in the industry thus far is actually pretty mixed, but most of it lies in the surf industry. I'm from Orange County, and that's where I've lived pretty much most of my career. So I've been working in the surf industry full time, and then in LA for smaller companies as well. So I kind of have a mix of working for super small, kind of grassroots startups to more established, bigger corporations. And right now, I am just on my own freelancing.
That's awesome. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about, you had a great breadth of experience in the industry, working for a variety of different brands, and that was mostly in LA. Is that correct?
Kind of half and half. I would say most of my career now has been actually in Orange County in the surf industry, but it's kind of like, I'd probably say 60-40.
Okay, so LA, Orange County area, and then if I'm not mistaken, your family moved, and that's when you kind of decided to do freelance. So is that what happened?
Exactly, yeah. A year ago, we moved up to San Luis Obispo County. We're living in Pismo Beach, and there's not, really much of an industry here. I did work for a golf apparel company on the women's side for about 6 months, and then it was just kind of got hard with childcare. We have a 2-year-old daughter and all that stuff. So I had the opportunity to stay home, and I decided I wanted to keep, at least a foot in the pond. I didn't just want to stop working altogether. So I tried my hand at freelancing, and it's actually going pretty well.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about what that process was like, because you went from, being a full-time employee or working as some type of employee status for most of your career. And then tell us about your journey into freelancing. What did you try? What worked? What didn't work? And kind of where you're at now. Yeah.
So I made the decision probably about 2 months before I actually quit the job at the golf company. I just knew it wasn't working, for like my life. And, I needed to do something different. And so I did a little bit of research and I found, Upwork.com, which is a website that kind of connects freelancers to people looking for freelancers. Mm-hmm. And I know that there are a couple other websites that do that as well. I found Upwork, the jobs on there, to be a little bit better suited towards me. So I went with Upwork and I just created a profile, and that's honestly where I started. And I just started kind of, like reaching out to, the different job postings and, kind of bidding for these different jobs. And most of them were just super small, didn't pay much, but I needed to get a little bit of experience under my belt. So, I did some things. I did logo design actually for this one girl, and I'm not even a graphic artist, and she knew that. And I told her, I'm like, look, I'll give my best shot at it. And it ended up going really well. But I even did some things that were kind of, not exactly what I wanted to do. And then I got really lucky. I found 2 clients that now I just work with. I don't work on Upwork anymore because they keep me very busy. I work one-on-one with them. And right now it's great for me because it's kind of the exact hours that I need. Staying home with a toddler is really challenging. So right now I'm only doing like 2 at best, like 3 hours a day of work. So it kind of works for me, and I could do more with them, which is cool. So when when those kind of life situations change, there will be more work for me, hopefully.
So I want to really dig into the whole Upwork process that you went through and kind of how you strategically worked through, getting those clients and then maybe taking them off of Upwork and figuring out what your rates were. Because I think one of the challenges that a lot of people seem to express with Upwork is that, there's a lot of people on there willing to do work for nothing, or there's brands or small startups that expect, this really, really, really low price. Mm-hmm. And so, did you see some of those challenges? And if so, how were you able to I know you said you did some like small low price projects and you did some stuff that was a little bit outside of, what you exactly wanted to do, but talk a little bit about, how you got started with that and then how you were able to progress and get those clients off of Upwork and maybe increase your rates, or, I don't know what your exact setup looked like, but take us through that process a little bit.
So at first I was willing to negotiate my rate. Like I had said, I was willing to take smaller jobs, make a little bit less money, but there's a lot of people on Upwork, and the people that are, the clients that are looking for freelancers have a lot of weeding through to do as well. Mm-hmm. And just from kind of talking to them, it can be frustrating. The one thing that worked for me that pretty much every client had said was, I saw your website and I loved it. Mm. So I think that the first thing, if you're looking to go into freelance, create yourself an awesome website. I used Squarespace. I'm not a web designer. I don't like code or anything. Squarespace is great if you're okay. If you want that look, it's a very specific look. If you want that look, then it's so easy and awesome. And I made mine on Squarespace and it turned out beautiful. And that's really been kind of the thing that snagged, I would say 90% of my clients. And kind of set me apart. You have your profile on there and, and I didn't, on Upwork, I was pretty, I was reasonable, but I wasn't low priced. So I would say right now, like I'm pretty good at my hourly. Like I could definitely bump it up a little bit. But I feel like I'm kind of at that sweet spot where people don't run away from it, but it also, doesn't really attract the people that want to pay you $5 for a project. But yeah, in terms of just I would say the strategy that kind of hooked most of my clients was my website. That's what they've been telling me.
Oh, that's great. So I'll link to your site in the show notes. And can you just say what the URL is for everybody listening? But I'll definitely put it in the show notes as well.
Sure. It's www.kimberlydippel.com. It's KimberlyDippel. com.
Okay, that's great. And so, without us having a visual right as we're talking, do you think there was anything specific on your site? I mean, it's a beautiful site, but do you think it was like how you presented your portfolio or how you presented, sort of like your resume of experience, or was there anything specific on the site that stood out to people?
I think what I've heard is that the overall kind of vibe of the site, it's like feminine and classic. The overall vibe is very like cohesive from like the color scheme and everything. And I think that kind of catches the eye. And then I'm lucky enough to have beautiful photography of the collections I've designed, which really helps. From, lookbooks and all that. I had access to those images and were able to use them on my website. And that, that's a huge thing right there. I mean, I'm sure if I had, an incredible illustration as like the homepage, that would also be eye-catching. But I think that the images really helped. And then it really showcases, I used pictures and images and designs that really showcase, who I am and kind of my style and where I come from. But I also wanted to show, diversity, that I'm not just, in this one bubble. I can, design for a variety of different clients and, with different styles, but I definitely have my own perspective. Yeah. So I tried to keep that from the font, the color scheme, kind of, everything to really show who I am.
Yeah. Well, and I love you're actually the second person I've had on the show who's mentioned, the power and strength of using those marketing images, like the actual photography. I mean, CADs are great, flats are great, but you can tell such a stronger story with those marketing images. So the value of using those, if you have the ability to, as a designer, to really showcase the finished product.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and you're telling a story, and it's very. People look and they want to see beautiful images. They really just want to see, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Okay, I want to delve more into this, and then I have my technical work on there and all that stuff. So they can see, okay, this person, can back up these images with, this is the work and this is the process that, went along. Because I didn't take those photos,
Sure.
So.
Okay, so that's great. And so you put together a really cohesive, sort of well-branded presentation of yourself on your site to really show who you are and what you do and your design aesthetic. And that obviously, I mean, you've heard feedback specifically from the people you've done work with that was sort of the impetus that pushed them over the edge to want to work with you. So kind of going backwards a little bit, I'd love to talk a little bit, and you don't have to share any numbers if you're not comfortable. That's absolutely fine. But just in general, like, okay, you started, if I'm not mistaken from a conversation we had earlier, like you started at a lower rate just to get some projects and reviews, and then you slowly increased your rate. So can you talk a little bit about like how did you explain that to some of the clients you were working with, and what that whole like price raising process was like? Because I think that's a scary spot for some people. They're like, oh, well, if I start at X dollars an hour, how am I going to explain if I need to raise it? And so what did you do to kind of walk your customers through that journey with you?
Yeah, I think that can be a difficult thing. The way that I did it was, honestly, it was pretty easy because right now, if I, raised my rates on a current client I have, I would have probably, go into a whole, spiel and want to explain why and all that. But the way I did it on Upwork is that you have your profile and you have your hourly rate on there. But when I would reach out to clients, I would say, this is my hourly rate. I'm willing to negotiate that a little bit. And then we would talk further. So I would say, okay, maybe for this project, I'll do it for $5 less an hour, and we would negotiate that. But it was only for that specific project. Mm-hmm. But they knew what my standard rate was. Mm-hmm. And either it was because, hey, like I'm passionate about this project, I really want to do this, or I was just very honest. I'm new here, I want to build my reputation. And so I was very honest about that. So it was kind of like, okay, for this project, I'll do it for this rate. this is my standard rate. And it kind of went from there. The clients that I have right now, I didn't do, no, that I take that back. One of them, I did do the first project for much lower than I actually work. And I did tell him that, I was very honest about it. I said, look, like for this project, I'm very passionate about it. I could see, further opportunities. There was opportunity to keep going with this project. And at that point I told them I would charge my standard rate, and that person agreed. And it was, I laid it all out there in the beginning and was just very honest, and I didn't have any issues. But I haven't come across where, okay, I'm working for X amount of dollars and, okay, all of a sudden I'm going to jump up, and kind of like charge you a little bit more. Yeah. I haven't done that yet. So I can't really speak to how I would approach that just yet.
Sure.
But yeah, that's kind of how I did it in the beginning. It was kind of per project, and it was just very honest.
And so it was almost like, hey, let's, I want this project. I'm willing to do the initial project with you at almost like a trial rate to make sure that we're a good fit and to show you what I can do and to make sure that we work well together. And then going forward, anything from that on is going to be at the standard rate.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great strategy.
Yeah, I mean, if you can do it, I'm in a position where I'm able to do that in my life right now. Had I tried to freelance a few years ago, oh my gosh, it would have been a lot more stressful. Because everyone has to bring home a certain amount to make their ends meet.
Yeah.
So I think it would have been more difficult for me to do that a few years ago. But I can kind of play around with it now, which is a nice, kind of a luxury.
Yeah. And so, talk a little bit about what types of clients are you finding out there on Upwork? Are you doing all sorts of startup work, or is it working with some established brands? And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, what are the differences? What do those projects kind of look like? What are some of the differences you as a freelancer see in terms of what you have to manage working with one type of client versus another type?
Yeah. So on Upwork, it's pretty much what I have come across in my experience it is mostly all startups, which can be fun, but they can also be extremely challenging. And I've gotten lucky where, if I had kind of been talking to a client, we're talking about a certain, job, and I haven't committed to it yet. I've kind of tried to feel out, okay, how organized are these people? How committed are they? Because I've had a client in particular say, okay, we're sending you this project, here's a PDF, here's all the notes we want, it was for tech packs. And then, I would have a question, I wouldn't hear from them. And then 3 weeks later, they'd be like, oh, well, we changed our collection. Here you go. They just were not communicative, did not have, we're not organized. And so I just said, okay, you know what, this just isn't for me. This isn't really working out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have other things that I'm doing, and I need to schedule, make sure I do time, create time for everyone, and I'm creating time for you, and then you're just not responding. So
yeah, I was going to ask you, what are some of the red flags in terms of the initial sort of communication process or the bidding process? What are some of the red flags with some of these clients that you're maybe this isn't a good match for me?
For me, honestly, I was kind of turned off when someone would just send me their collection really without, or notes or, really important information about what they're doing without having me, or wanting me to sign an NDA or something like that. It just showed that they didn't really understand that they needed to protect themselves. And my two clients I have now, I signed NDAs with them. They were very organized, very professional. They really had their ducks in a row, even though they were startups. And I found that to be kind of comforting, just because it told me that they were serious about what they were doing. Some people just send me all their notes, or, maybe they don't have access to, a lawyer to drop the NDA and all that stuff. I understand that stuff takes, money, and I totally get that. But yeah, some people would just send me all of their stuff. I'm you don't even know me. We've talked one time. I don't know. I could just tell it was it was real amateur level, which is fine. But then, from there, are you communicative? Are you organized? I would kind of watch out for those things after that.
Yeah.
And it would either still, it would either go, okay, okay, these people are serious about it, or it would just be a disaster. And I would just, say, okay, this isn't working. And that's only happened 2 times.
Okay. And so it sounds like you said, most of the work is startups. And so, I think for a lot of designers out there who maybe are going into freelancing for the first time, perhaps their experience is working with some established brands as an employee where you have a full team and everybody's been doing this for a while, or at least, your boss and some of your coworkers and managers and things are established internally, little things down to like trims and fit and stuff is developed that you're kind of using over and over. And so then to contrast that against a startup, how are you as a freelancer, finding some of these processes different than working internally for, or perhaps even freelance for a startup brand? And what are some of the things you've learned in terms of like how to manage that process or how to manage the client better or anything like that? What's that been like for you?
Well, a lot of these startups, they do, I find, rely on me a lot for guidance, either within the process or, what should our graded specs look like and, fit and everything. So they've given me quite a bit of freedom to kind of guide them. I'd say, okay, well, I'll write up your graded specs kind of, based on what I've used in the past that would pertain to what you're doing. This is kind of how, I think that your fit should be based on what you want. And so when you're working with startups, you really do have to be willing because they want guidance. And I can only give them what, my expertise is in, and I'm very honest. I don't try and guide them in things that I'm not versed well in sales. So I would never try and like direct them in sales, but
Sure.
For what I'm doing, they really do need a lot of guidance. Like, okay, so what's next? Okay, so what should I do here? What should I do here? I just had kind of a conversation, with one of my clients, on a project, and we were talking about specs and shrinkage. And I kind of had to like, okay, so who's washing the garment? Like, is it being garment washed at the factory? Is it being washed, by the consumer? Kind of, what is the whole goal here? And then we were able to like figure out the solution to the spec problem. But they, those aren't really things that they're necessarily thinking about because maybe they don't have the experience and that's why they hired you. So you really kind of have to think sometimes, sometimes you assume that they know certain things, but you kind of have to assume that they don't know, really what they're doing and kind of guide them, which can be more work, but that's kind of just the nature of working with a startup in most cases. I mean, some people are startups and they've been doing this for years and they know what they're doing.
Sure.
So it really depends on the client.
But a lot of times it sounds like they look at you as the expert and they look at you for the consultation and the guidance and the support to help navigate them down this path. Whereas working with an established brand, might be more them just giving you this specific task. Okay, we need you to draw these. We need you to come up with, 8 concepts for this item or something.
Exactly. So essentially you can be doing a lot more work with the startups.
Yeah.
Working with an established brand where they already have all these guidelines and, procedures, like you said, they're, internally they're pretty set. You kind of just like ride the wave and do what they need you to do. But yeah, I found with startups, it actually is more work mentally and more correspondence. You're explaining things a lot.
And so how do you track your time in terms of like if they call you and you hop on a 15-minute phone call, are you tracking your hourly rate for that? Or if you spend, even just 10 minutes answering an email, but then you do that 10 times a week, that adds up to a couple hours. And so how are you like really managing all of that, just the correspondence portion of it?
Yeah, it can be challenging. What I've found that works for me is I use an app called Evernote, and it's all, it syncs to my phone, my computer, it's kind of with me everywhere. And so if I do something, even an email, I just kind of log in and I have different kind of notebooks, they call them in that app for each client. And I just say like, okay, like email, and I do a 5-minute, I mean, even if it's 5 minutes, I just write it down.
Yeah.
Because when I'm invoicing, and I usually do detailed invoices,
okay,
kind of itemized. So my, on this day, I did this and this, very kind of vague, but just so that the client feels comfortable.
Right.
Like, okay, this is what they did. I'll even I'll write down, okay, email 5 minutes. So I can kind of say like correspondence, I spent, 15 minutes this day if I did 3 5-minute emails.
Sure.
It's a lot more work when invoicing, but I find that it really does kind of put my clients at ease, and, they trust me that I'm not, just like adding an hour here and adding an hour there. So one of my clients I communicate with on Skype a lot, just kind of like a constant conversation throughout the day, or if, he quickly, thinks about something that, he wants me to do, it just kind of works. He's international. He travels a lot. So for him, it works. And for me, it's fine. So that's been kind of a difficult thing to keep track of, because some days we don't talk at all. And some days it's kind of like throughout the day, constant messaging. So I kind of just gauge how much time I spent on it.
Yeah.
And I just, I throw it in there. It's like, if you want me to be available on Skype, then, I'm just going to gauge. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been an issue with it.
Yeah.
So I think just being kind of, really straightforward with your clients, and, kind of how you bill, and having that conversation in the beginning is important. And they'll know if you're doing emails, you're working. So
yeah, that's time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you only do a few emails a week, and then you charge 3 hours for emails on your invoice, they're going to know something's up.
Right.
If there's not that big of a discrepancy, it hasn't been an issue for me yet.
Yeah. No, I just think that's important though, because, correspondence does take time. And I've chatted with some people who are like, if I talk to them on the phone for 10 minutes, I don't know if I should be charging for that time. And to me, it's still it's your time. And you only have so many hours in the day, and you need to be compensated for the ones that you are giving them your support, whether that be having a call to talk them through something, or whether you're actually, sketching in Illustrator or whatever it is. That's your time, and that needs to be billed.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's great.
To me, it makes you look more professional as well. You say, I'm worth it. I'm worth this time.
Yeah.
And worth, the money, and I'm providing you a specific service, and I should be compensated. It shows that, you're a professional, you're confident in your own abilities, and
Yeah, no, that's great. So I want to rewind a little bit and go back a little bit more through the Upwork process in terms of, kind of digging through all the jobs that are posted, and then sending out your bid or your pitch or your proposal. So, I think it can get a little overwhelming, or I shouldn't even, I'm assuming that. So I'll let you explain, but going through all the jobs that are posted on there, what are you looking for? Is there a way you figured out to kind of filter? You see something, you're like, okay, well, I can just kind of tell off the bat, that's not going to be a good match. It's not even worth my time to bid that. What has that whole process been like to even filter out the stuff that you think this could be a good match?
Let's see. It's been quite a few months since I've been on Upwork, but how I did it in the beginning was they're pretty good at kind of promoting the jobs that match with your profile on there. So kind of every day it's 15 new jobs on Upwork for you. And, I'd kind of start there. And I really went by, they have kind of the header and then the description. Honestly, that kind of tells me all I need to know, how they're written, what their needs are. There would be some jobs that say, design collection of activewear, $10, but it didn't say $10 hourly, didn't say $10 flat. And then there's kind of something on there that says, willing to pay more for experienced freelancers or something like that. And the whole thing was, I'm like, this is a mess. There's no details. You're not saying the size of the collection. I really don't want to delve too much further into this.
Yeah.
So I would not even waste my time. In the very beginning, I would have applied to it. But I have noticed that the jobs that have really worked out for me and have been good clients have been the job descriptions are pretty detailed, and good information was given for me. You always have questions because it's like, okay, well, how many pieces and what do you want? I always ask, what do you want these tech packs to look like? What are your expectations? Because I do a lot of tech packs. So I'm just using tech packs as an example. But some people want these tech packs that are like extremely elaborate and detailed and all of these, zoom ins and then some people just want like a very simple tech pack, for their domestic factory who doesn't need all this crazy stuff.
Right.
And the products are different. So there's always like a lot of questions that I have, but I think if the initial post is pretty detailed on what the work is going to, what the work is like and what the project is like, I'm way more apt to submit a proposal to that job than someone with like a brief description.
Yeah. It's like
how people don't understand.
Yeah, it's like how professionally did they present themselves is a really good indicator of what they're probably going to be like to work with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's been my experience. And there's always exceptions to the rule, but that's usually what I found.
Yeah. And then did you do anything strategic in like the actual, I think on Upwork, they call it a bid this job, like within your bid or your proposal write-up. Was there anything strategic that you did to kind of stand out, especially for those first few jobs that you were trying to get before you had any reviews or ratings?
The thing that worked for me, I think, is that I would kind of start out with, I think like the first line that you write, really has to catch their attention, like in anything. Mm-hmm. They're getting, you can see how many people have applied to jobs. I mean, sometimes it's like 50 to 100, sometimes it's like 500. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So I would kind of start out with like, I can't remember exactly what I would write, but I'm an apparel designer with over 12 years experience, full-time experience in the industry. I've worked for notable companies such as, I would go on to say Quiksilver, Oneil. And, when they see those names, mm-hmm. if you've worked for a company that has, any type of mass appeal or people, it's a household name. I mean, I think you need to include that in the very beginning because that's eye-catching and people mm-hmm. will say, okay, this person is the real deal. Like they've worked for this established company. They obviously have some great experience and they'll keep reading. So I kind of tried to like get those things, I've had a lot of experience. I've worked for these companies. And then obviously I would always include my website at the bottom.
Right in the proposal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you can upload like examples of your work. And I kind of found that to be, I don't know. Sometimes I would do it depending on the job. I would usually say, please check out my website for, examples of my work, or how I would word it better than that. But, so it was kind of like, okay, they could click and they could see my whole website.
Yeah.
So I didn't really upload too many examples of my work just because I had my website and it seemed to be fine.
Clearly it was. I mean, you got feedback that was like a reason people decided to work with you.
Yeah. People are going through these things fast too. So I didn't make it too long. I didn't make it too short. And then I tried to make just going to the website very easy.
Yeah. And so then you would maybe, let's say a conversation was initiated and then you would talk through it and then, and obviously you don't land every job, but you landed some and then you took some of them off of Upwork. Is that correct?
I did, yes.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that. Like, how did you feel like you were ready to do that? How did you approach that conversation? Was the client comfortable? Because I think that can be, I've talked to some people who are like, there's a comfort to working in Upwork because you're guaranteed payment and, everything's kind of tracked. And I think that some people can feel a little bit nervous about going off of Upwork because you could not get paid or something. But when you're on the platform, they take a pretty good chunk of your money.
It hurts, yeah.
And it's a great service out there. So I don't mean to like discount what they're doing. It's a great service for everybody to kind of connect and find someone to do their project or find a project to work on. But at some point you're kind of like, oh, I'm paying this fee over and over. It's just quite a bit. So
yeah, you can't really stand to do that for too long. So I've taken a few clients off and I would always do my first project through them through Upwork and get paid and make sure everything went smoothly. And if we decided to continue to work together, usually I would have already had like a phone conversation with them, or like some of my clients, we would, video chat on Skype. So we could say, I'm a real person, you're a real person, you make that connection.
Yeah.
I would always have like information about their business, like their business address, and make sure they're, legit. And then, we would kind of talk about it, and I would say, okay, look, I'm willing to work off of Upwork. If you are, and then I signed like a contract with one of my clients who I work with, a lot. And it was very loose. It wasn't binding or anything, but it was kind of saying, okay, you are going to be a contractor for us. And, kind of spelling out all of, the details and rate stuff. So like my rate was locked into this contract. It was not binding at all. It wasn't anything like you need to work for us for 3 months. And,
Sure.
It was like this can be, basically terminated at any point by either party, but it was just very, it was kind of like, okay, this company's legit, this person's legit, and I feel comfortable. And I just really used my gut instinct. And it has been fine. I have not had a bad experience yet. But I kind of knew when it was time, and there were certain things that made me feel, very comfortable doing so.
Okay. So, so just having something in writing kind of can make each party feel a little bit more secure. But like you said, it doesn't have to be anything super fancy legally. So it can just be, something that you both are agreeing to. Yeah.
And I have never written up the contract, so I don't really have any advice on that. It was always sent to me by the client, and I would obviously read through it and make sure there wasn't anything crazy in there, anything
Sure.
Extremely binding.
Sure.
But yeah, I have never personally written up the contract, so that's probably something I should look into for the future. But
yeah.
So yeah, I can't really speak to that.
No. And that's absolutely fine. And that's something that, perhaps there's some basic templates or something online that you could probably use as a starting point.
Yeah.
So it seems as though, going through Upwork and then getting a few stable clients was a great process for you.
Yeah, I had success.
Yeah,
it really was kind of the thing, because like all of us, I have contacts in the industry, and I obviously reached out to, my contacts as well, but no, people like to hire freelancers right now, just from what I'm finding, at least in, Southern California, where most of my experience is, but, they want you in-house full time. So yeah, of course, freelancers are great because, you can kind of get the benefits without, paying them benefits.
Yeah.
And, all the different things that come along with full-time employees, but, they want you there, which is understandable. A lot of work, especially if you're in fittings and improving fabrics and lab dips and all this stuff, that can be challenging remotely. So, I just didn't have any luck with my contacts at the time I was looking for it.
Gotcha. And so, did you have any challenges with Upwork in terms of like when you were first getting started, did you feel like there was a period where you were like, oh, I'm just applying to so much stuff and I'm not really hearing back? Or, were there some frustrations initially to kind of get things kickstarted?
Yes, absolutely. It was a lot of applying, writing proposals to jobs and, really hearing nothing back. Sometimes for I think a week was my longest. I was like, oh gosh, this isn't working. But, you only kind of need one gem to come through that, is, kind of and create a relationship. And if they have, constant work and different projects, then, right now I really only work like I said, 2 main clients. And then I have some smaller clients here and there, which I still do things for, but it's not consistent.
Okay.
But yeah, my 2 main clients keep me really busy, and I found both of them on Upwork. So,
well, and I like hearing that because, I think that it can be really discouraging to apply and not hear anything for a week. But like you said, you just have to get those couple. And so at some point, I think you need to make sure that what you're sending out is good. And so you might want to, I don't know, did you experiment with how different ways you wrote your pitch, or see what got more responses versus less responses or anything, or you just kept sending the same thing and then finally it stuck?
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of I would have like my template, that I would use, my like intro, my closing, and then the middle part, depending on what the job was, I would kind of change each time. So it's not like I was totally just copying and pasting, which would have been a lot easier. Sometimes it worked that way, but yeah, usually I would have to kind of rewrite the proposal and highlight certain skills that I had that pertain to what they were looking for. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, it was in terms of what kind of, I felt worked for me. It was kind of the same formula, just changing really what I would highlight about myself.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of what I did. And it seemed to have worked pretty well.
So just in terms of like you said, highlighting some of your skills, making sure that was specifically relatable to the project that they were posting.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha. And so not just sending a generic template over and over.
Yeah, I don't think I would have gotten as many, jobs or feedback if I had just sent the same thing. Yeah. Because, some of the jobs I would apply to were I do a lot of activewear. So, some of them were for activewear. Some of them were sportswear. Some of them were, just all we want. We have our designs. We're all good. We just need tech packs. So it was, I would highlight more of my technical skills.
Yeah.
If it was designing, then I would, have to highlight more of, my creative skills. And so, yeah, doing that kind of just, I think, just basically, play into what they want, and just make sure to highlight those strengths about yourself.
Yeah.
And be honest about what you can do as well.
Sure.
Or else you're just going to find yourself in a pickle.
Yeah, which is not going to be good.
Yeah.
For anybody. So one other thing I would like to just touch on really quickly is the NDA, because I have heard mixed feedback from designers or even like factories when they get asked to sign an NDA. And so, that was something that you said actually impressed you about the project or the client and made them look, really professional, and that they were, I think maybe you said something to that extent. But, as you as a designer, did you ever feel nervous with that? Like that was like locking you into, and this is a generic example, but like, let's say they're designing some activewear legging. And then, what if somewhere hidden in that NDA is saying like, you can't design leggings for another brand for a year or something, some type of like non-compete clause. Did you ever feel nervous about that? Or did you have a lawyer review those documents, or what was that like?
The smart thing to do is, I think, to have a lawyer review them. I didn't, because there was nothing in there that made me feel like, I'm not going to be able to, design for another brand that does this same thing. Mm-hmm. It was kind of just like, keep our designs, keep our concept, don't share like factories and all that stuff. It was pretty basic stuff.
Okay.
Like don't post about, this brand on social media.
Sure.
You like a lot of it was, wait until like, I can't put a lot of the work on my website until it's like kind of out there,
right?
Being sold.
Okay.
That type of stuff, which I felt comfortable with.
Okay.
There was no like, you can't design for another, activewear brand or another, handbag line. And I'm honest with my clients. Like, hey, I work with another brand, startup that's doing activewear. It's a totally different style than yours. It's a different thing. I'm kind of just, I try to be as transparent as possible. So that, they kind of know what I'm doing, but that, and you have to build that trust as well with your client. It just, it doesn't happen overnight. So, a lot of people want you to sign this NDA, but I have not run into anything that has made me feel like I am prohibited from working with other brands. If I did, I would probably call it out and say, hey, we need to talk about this part because this is making me feel, kind of uncomfortable. And, but yeah, I've only signed 2 of them so far, and both of them have been very, basic, and basically just, don't talk about our ideas and, put it out there to the world before we're ready.
And it sounds like they were written in like plain enough English that you read it and you could understand exactly what it meant.
Yes. Yeah. And they weren't like 15 pages long.
Okay.
They were pretty clear and basic, and I could understand them. So,
okay.
So, I didn't feel like I needed a lawyer.
Yeah, no, you say NDA and I picture like you said, a 15-page like legal jargon document that it's like, what am I signing? Like, I don't even know what half this means. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that explains that quite a bit better.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's fantastic. Anything else you want to share about your experience or process with Upwork, or any other advice you'd give to people who are trying to get started on that platform?
I would just say, be patient. Don't expect anything overnight. But if you feel like, you've been doing this for a few weeks and you're not having any success, kind of relook at maybe your profile or your proposals or how you are, presenting yourself, and see if there are any tweaks that you can make. Are you applying to the right jobs? I mean, sometimes you just don't, there are a lot of people applying to these jobs, and you can see if there were like 500 people applying to a job and it wasn't something that I was like, oh my gosh, I really want to do this, I honestly wouldn't even bother. Mm-hmm. That's just me. But I would say, try to be choosy about what you're applying to. But, I understand when you're first starting, you kind of just, you just go for broke and apply to kind of everything that would pertain to you. Yeah. So, and then just kind of don't be afraid to ask many questions about the project before you agree to it. A lot of the, jobs that I wrote proposals to, they wanted me to quote like a fee for the project, which can be challenging. So you really need to know as much information as you can. Like, I would say send me an example of kind of what you are expecting if you have one, like I would ask very detailed questions so that I would know, okay, this is how many hours this is going to take me. And then I would say, okay, if I give you the project, there can be like maybe a round of changes that are included in that project fee. And I would kind of like pad that in a little bit, knowing that there are going to be revisions, because there are always revisions.
Sure.
And then anything after that, I'm charging my hourly rate.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great tip. So include one round and then let them know, like, you're happy to make more, but it's going to be an additional fee.
Yeah. And you don't even have to include a round if you don't want to, if you don't feel comfortable doing that. Yeah. But I would, and then I would just kind of like bump it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. And then the other thing that you said that I just want to reiterate, which I think is great advice, is sort of that initial negotiation to do the first project at a lower rate, but going in and being very honest and transparent and clear that, okay, we'll do this at this rate, but then assuming everybody's happy working together, we'll move to the regular rate. Because that's a great way for both of the parties, you and the client, to kind of test each other out.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you really have to be, you both have to be a good fit.
Yeah.
And yeah, it kind of gives them a comfort level of, okay, like, this person is also, wants to make sure that, everything is going to go smoothly before they commit, fully, but they're willing to give me a little bit, initially. And it kind of just creates a little bit of a comfort level, I think.
Yeah.
If you can do that.
Yeah.
Even if you knock a few dollars off an hour, I know that kind of adds up depending on the project, but
sure.
It worked for me anyway.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. And maybe, like you said, maybe making sure that it's a smaller project, or that you could get to like the first milestone, and then, that if it didn't work, that would be a comfortable breaking off point. Mm-hmm. If it was something kind of big that you didn't want to do that lower hourly rate for too long.
Exactly.
So that's great.
Yeah. And just another thing I'll note, this is kind of like it's on subject, but it's kind of a detailed thing that I initially didn't really think about and add into my time. And if you, like, let's say you're doing tech packs and, you're going to send that final tech pack in a PDF. Let's say you do part of the tech pack in Illustrator. Let's say you do the specs and everything in Excel. Make sure to think about the time it's going to take for you to save all those and put them into a single PDF, because it can be time consuming. And for my first big project that I quoted like a flat rate for, I kind of forgot about that whole part of the process. And depending on how many tech packs you do, it can take hours.
Yeah, to package everything up.
Exactly. So just kind of think about that as well.
Yeah.
That's one mistake I made. I was like, oh, man.
I still have to package this all up and merge all these documents together.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just tedious work. And there are shortcuts, but it still takes time.
Yeah, it does. And like you said, especially if you're doing a big batch. So maybe like really thinking about every step of the process that it takes to go from zero to finish for the project. Which, sometimes you miss something and that just took longer than you expected. I've had that same thing happen with project-based fees before. So, it happens and you learn from that and then you can adjust next time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So great tip. Thank you so much, Kim. This was really awesome. Share again where everybody can find you online.
Sure. My website is www.kimberlydippel.com. It's KIMBERLYDIPPEL.
Awesome. Perfect. And I will put links to that in the show notes. And I would love to finish with the question I ask everybody at the end of the show. And it takes some people a minute to kind of think of their answer, so no rush or pressure. But what is one thing that nobody asks you about working in fashion that you wish people would ask about?
Oh gosh, let's see. Honestly, I would, I would say nobody has ever really asked me, sometimes you'll get, what does your day look like? But nobody really asks you about like the nitty gritty details of truly what you are doing all day. I have a couple of, cousins of mine and their friends, and they're very interested in going into fashion in one capacity or another, whether it be design or merchandising, and they'll ask me questions, but they've never, really asked me what skills do I need in order to like complete my like day-to-day tasks.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, well, at least on the design side and technical side, and even actually, and merchandising side as well. You need to know your like computer programs, your Adobe Illustrator, your Photoshop. Obviously Excel comes in there.
Yeah.
And then there are, product line management programs that some companies use, and you kind of just learn those at the job there. But it's very computer oriented, and it's a lot of tedious work that I found myself doing.
Yep. Like
not a lot of it was, it was kind of a luxury sometimes when I would get to design, because you're doing tech packs and, sometimes you're handling your own product development with China. Sometimes you have someone that does it for you, depending on the company. But like really like the nitty gritty kind of skills that you need to build on top of just your raw talent. I wish more people, because that's what you end up doing. That's what you end up spending the time doing.
Yeah.
A lot.
No, it's a great point. A lot of your time is spent like making revisions in Excel, or revisions in Illustrator, or updating things in Excel, and correspondence and like follow up and managing just certain tasks. And yeah, you don't get to spend as much time doing just the creative, awesome design stuff that I think a lot of people imagine goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah. And you need to have that, because that's,
sure,
usually why you're being hired. But at the same time, like I would say 75% of what I do is not even that. And, they want all this other stuff done, and they want it done fast.
Yeah.
So really building your computer skills and your speed and your efficiency is really going to help you a lot, at least on the design side.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And I've heard people say similar things to me. Someone made a comment, I think on an Instagram photo I just posted, that you need to know math. Like, she's a technical designer, and she's like, who would have thought? But you need to have some basic math skills to do some of these things. And I was like, it's so funny, like all the things that you don't think about.
Yeah, know your fractions and your your centimeters, and totally.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great tip. Well, so much fun to chat with you, and thank you for all the great insights and resources, and really appreciate you sharing all the advice for getting started on Upwork and sharing your story and your journey with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. Talk to you later.
All right. Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to episode 16 of the Successful Fashion Designer podcast. If you'd like to learn more about any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit the show notes at sfdnetwork.com/16. And since you made it this far, you must have liked the episode. If you can take 60 seconds to leave a review on iTunes, it helps the show a lot and makes the podcast easier for other people to discover. It's super easy to do, and I'd really appreciate it. Visit sfdnetwork.com/review to leave your rating, and thanks for your support and help.